Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome once again to The Alignment Show. I am Don King. I'll be your host this week, as every week. And we have a guest coming up today that I am getting to know just like you are. So we want to make sure that you have the show notes available so that you can get to her resources. You can always find show notes at confidencecultivators.com, and we'll have that crawl going across the bottom there for a while. Also want to mention our sponsors here. One that we frequently mention is the SalesWise Live folks. Now, if you're not familiar with Bob Berg, I can't imagine how, especially after listening to this program for a while. But Bob is the co-author of the Go Giver series of books, along with John David Mann. And Bob and Jeff West, another one of our friends here on the show, have teamed up with Kim Angeli to really help with training in what I would consider to be effective and ethical sales, which is not about manipulation. It's about forming genuine relationships. It's not just for salespeople. In fact, I think SalesWise Live would help you to develop personal relationships. And so check that out. There's obviously no obligation to check into it. They've got another one coming up in September. Also, sponsoring the show, it kind of seems a little weird to say it, but sponsoring the show is my books, which you can find out more about by going to donking.com. That's DONN, donking.com/books. That offering will grow with time. We are working right now on the third book in the Sparklight Chronicles. The second one I've got up on the screen here, Medium Well, has been out for a couple of months. It's a follow-up to The Way of the 3-Year-Old Why, all of them designed as business parables to help you live your values to value your life. And so check those out. I think you will find your life better as a result. And speaking of better as a result, we have a guest this week who is someone who works with leaders to help them be more effective. And she's not just speaking from theory. She's been in the trenches. So we're going to learn about her journey, how she came to help other people to form leadership skills, individuals seeking to become leaders, and organizations who are wanting to develop effective leaders. Let's welcome to the stage Vanessa Judelman. Vanessa, thank you for being on The Alignment Show.
Great to be here with you, Don.
Thank you. Well, we'll start right in with the origin story stuff. I know that you worked with an organization that did similar kind of work. What I don't know is what brought you even to that organization to begin with. I mean, what got you started thinking about leadership in the first place? I guess a related question is, did you even think about it before joining that firm? Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely not. I mean, when you grow up, Don, nobody says, I want to be a leadership consultant coach when I grow up, right? It wasn't a thing. However, my mother was a teacher. And when I was in university, I was an English major. And she kept saying to me, what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to make money as an English major? So why don't you go to teachers college? So after I finished my first degree, I went back and I did a degree in education. And at that time, when I graduated, there weren't a lot of jobs for teachers. So I started out teaching at-risk youth. And Dawn, after getting a few binders thrown at my head and chairs thrown at me, I was like, oh boy, maybe we need to rethink this career. And so a friend of mine, actually I was volunteering for an organization. And I met somebody there who's now a very, very close friend of mine. But she was a perfect stranger at the time. And we went around the circle and everybody said, this is what I do. And this is what I do. And she said, oh, I work at a training and consulting firm with adults. I was like, wow, that sounds interesting because my passion is education. But wouldn't that be a whole lot more civilized working with adults than at risk youth? So, anyways, I talked to her about the job. And as it happens, she was moving into a new role. She was promoted and a spot had opened up. So I interviewed and I got a job at that organization. It was a training and consulting company called Micah, and I worked there for 10 years. I started right at the bottom. I was an assistant to the VP and I worked with her for 18 months. And then she promoted me into sales position and junior consultant, senior consultant. And so that was really where I learned how the nuts and bolts of business. And then after being in that organization for 10 years, I thought, my eventual vision was to open up my own business, which I've been running now for 12 years. But I do need to, as you said in my intro, work in the trenches. So that's when I left consulting and moved into organizations and built departments and built teams and hired people and had great people working for me who loved my leadership style. And to be honest, Don, I had people who worked on my team who hated me as a leader. And it was from those people that actually I learned the most from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see that. That makes sense. Let me go back just a little bit. Understand my major in college. I chose journalism as a major because it was as close as I could get to not declaring a major. Because journalists, by virtue of what they do, poke their nose into all aspects of human experience. Why did you choose English to begin with?
Oh, it was a no-brainer because I loved reading books. And I said to myself, wow, I can actually get a degree for reading.
Okay.
Why doesn't everybody do this? Like, to me, it was the most logical thing. I get a degree for doing something I love. And what I love about reading is it's a window into many different worlds. Whether you're reading fiction or nonfiction, you learn. Every time I read a book, I learn.
Okay. And again, this makes perfect sense to me. What I'm kind of getting at here, and I'm going to say, if your experience varies from this, feel free to disagree. But there are a lot of people who will say English, psychology, whatever it is, useless degrees. You can't make a living with that. You should major in business. You should major in one of the sciences. My contention is college is about developing more effective functioning as a human being. And so an English degree, a psychology degree is very portable. So I'm curious from your experience now, did the English degree or just college in general give you preparation for what you're doing now in surprising ways?
Oh, 1,000%. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. What's interesting also, when I went to high school, I went to school for the arts and I was a drama major. Again, so something in the arts, you think, well, how's the arts going to prepare you for the real world? Dawn, I now speak on a stage. I speak in front of 2, 3, 500, 1,000 people as a keynote speaker. I'm not nervous. I'm well prepared. I know how to enunciate. I know what it means to have presence on a stage. As an English major, I know how to write. I've written a book, like you have written a couple of books. I write a blog every week. So you learn so many transferable skills in college. And you're right, it is about having a broad education. And I'm a firm believer in everything you do in life is going to help you in the future somehow. You may not know it at the time, but it will help you somehow down the road.
Yeah. Along similar lines, from what I hear with you with that company, is that you did not start as a trainer. You were an assistant. So you've done all levels within that. How did that prepare you for what you're doing now, compared to? Gosh, how should I put this? I know people who go straight in as trainers or as salespeople, and then when they have their own business, there are areas that they not only don't know about, they don't know that they don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, when you're an entrepreneur and you're running your own business, you have to wear so many different hats. You're marketing yourself. You have to know how to write a proposal. You have to know the finance side of running your business. You have to know what is involved in business development. And so I had all of those structures in place. I've been writing proposals for 10 years. I knew what it meant to follow up with clients. I knew what it meant to how to invoice. I mean, running a business has a lot of details. Showing up to a client is probably, by the time I get to a client, Don, I've done probably 20 different things before I actually get there. So, yeah, you do learn a lot. And that's the advice I always give to young people who want to be entrepreneurs. I always say to them, go work for someone else for at least 5 years. Why not learn on their dime?
Yeah, learning on the job. In fact, is
Yeah.
with you with every level, I could almost turn that over. There are a lot of people who will, and I don't know if a lot is the right way to put it, but I know people who were trainers and they know their topic area, but they don't know what it's like to be a manager or higher up in the organization, especially as you're helping to develop leadership.
Yes.
You were a leader in that company, and then you worked building your own team. So tell us a little more about that in the trenches aspect of what you
Oh, yeah. Well, when I started working for the first organization that I worked in after I left the consulting firm, I mean, when I was in the consulting firm, I had a team too. But when I moved to this organization, I was starting a department from scratch. So they didn't have a learning and development department in the organization. So I was brought in to start the organization, to start the department. So I worked for a year just by myself and put some infrastructure in place and then built a team. And interestingly enough, after I was there about 3 years, I went on my first maternity leave. And so while I was there, I didn't hire somebody, but they brought someone in to cover my maternity leave. And when I came back, she was still there. And this is the person that really struggled with my leadership, because my leadership style, if you know the DISC profile, Don, I'm an
Yes.
ID,
Yeah.
right? So I'm very collaborative and I'm enthusiastic, but I also drive for results. And I like to give people a lot of autonomy. However, this person was a C. She was conscientious, polar opposite in every way to me. She needed a lot of time with me. She needed a lot of detail. She needed a lot of structure. And I'm like, well, just go figure it out. I don't need to give you the structure. You're an adult. But what I learned from her was it's not about me. As a leader, you have to learn how to change or adjust your style to meet the needs of other people on your team. So I had to learn to slow down. I had to learn to really listen. I had to learn to put structure in place. And I also learned to delegate and how to delegate. So there's certain things that she did way better than I did, Don. And so what
Hmm.
I learned to do is to delegate to her so she could handle a lot of the structure and follow through, and I could be visionary and I could plan and really rely on her to implement.
So it's a complementary style. Over time, did she, because you've said a couple of times, she had a problem with your leadership style. Did she come to look at it that way? That is, it was complementary, or did she continue to struggle?
When I changed, she
Yes.
struggled less.
Ah,
So it
okay.
was it was all about me as the leader. I had to change.
Very good. I mean, that's a fantastic insight all by itself.
Mhm.
Do you find as you work with, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you work with people who want to become leaders, you also work with organizations who want to develop leaders. Am I saying
Yes.
that right? Okay.
Yeah, so I work with all levels of leaders. So I work with people, most organization people are promoted into a leadership role and they don't know that being a leader is a completely different job. So
Hmm.
let's say you're a journalist. Let's use your background as an example, right? And you go to journalism, like you study that in college, and you become an expert. And I actually have worked. I live in Toronto, actually, with the Toronto Star, so I have worked with journalists. So you get promoted into a role where now you're managing a team. And it's very different. if you're an plug-in journalist for engineer, for architect, for accountant, tech expert, marketing expert, et cetera. You go to university, you go to college, you learn a skill, then you get promoted into a leadership role. Now you have to lead people, completely different job. So that's what I do with entry-level leaders, how to lead. What are the nuts and bolts of leadership? Then I work with sort of those leaders also, say, who are moving from director to VP. Again, every time you move into a new level of leadership, I call it new level, new devil, you have to learn new skills, right? You have to develop new behaviors. And then I also do one-on-one coaching, executive coaching at the executive level. People think, oh, you're a CEO, you know everything. Absolutely not. Again, many of the CEOs that I coach, or executives that I coach, they also have never had leadership training. They don't know how to build a high-performing team. Nobody taught them how to give feedback. Nobody taught them how to, what does strategy mean? That there's actually different parts of strategy. So yeah, those are the different areas that I work in my practice on.
Well, I've got to tell you the reason I'm smiling so big. And I did work in journalism, newspapers, and radio, and that kind of thing for a number of years. Most of my career has been in academics, and I see the
Oh,
same thing. I see the same thing. Um, the reason I'm smiling so much, though, is one of my standard stories for my students. In academics, I have taught public speaking for going on 40 years. One of my standard stories is about not the first editor that I worked for, but it was early in the career, daily newspaper. He literally drank Maalox like milk. He kept a bottle in his just miserable human being. I'm not going to go into the whole story here, but I figured out pretty soon that what was going on was that he had been an award-winning investigative reporter, and we reward people by promoting them. So all of a sudden, instead of doing what he had studied how to do, which you were talking about, what he loved to do, which was to dig out information, he loved exposing corruption and that kind of thing. And now he's supervising 12 other people who are doing what he loved to do. His best day on the job was when one of us called in sick and he had to go out and cover a story. And he had had no training whatsoever in leadership. So this is a big way to set up the question, which is, do you find that a lot of these new leaders, or even the ones who are moving up to the next level, that they're frustrated, they're stressed, and it's not that they hate the job, it's that once they figure out how to do it, the joy comes back into it for them. Is that
100%.
overstating it, or?
Oh, 100%. You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, because so they're frustrated. Um, Many of them what I call unconscious leaders. So what I teach my leaders is how to lead consciously. So we start with knowing yourself, right? Leading consciously means you know yourself. So it means I learned with that first person who didn't like my leadership style. I didn't know myself. I had to understand that as someone who likes to think big picture and is a visionary person and a motivator, I need to sometimes slow down and get into the details because that's what some people need and require from their leader.
Mhm.
So a lot of these leaders live unconsciously. And what I teach them to do is live consciously. Wake up every morning, think about what is the tone that you want to set. Think about what does it mean for you to be an authentic leader. Now, what it means for me to be authentic, Don, would be different from what it means for you to be authentic and from anyone else, right? What does it mean for you to be authentic? I often in a workshop will say to leaders, okay, pick 3 words that describe who you want to be as a leader. Nobody picks the same 3 words. It could be, I want to be strategic, I want to be innovative, and I want to be thorough. And someone else could say, I want to be exacting, I want to be realistic, and I want to be optimistic. I mean, sky's the limit, but you have to know yourself. You have to pick those words and start every day consciously knowing that you set the tone as a leader, right? You make or break people's experience at work. So part of when I work with new leaders, Don, is get them to really understand what their authentic leadership style is. The second part of it is give them the nuts and bolts, like the practical specifics, like that individual that you described, your boss. He didn't know how to give feedback. He didn't know how to. You can actually create and build a high performing team. There's steps. Have you heard of forming, storming, norming, and high performing?
Oh yeah, we
Yeah.
we we teach that in the interpersonal communication classes at an academic level. So you're using it in practical terms here.
Totally. So when
Yeah.
I work with leaders, I give them like a checklist. What do you do when you're informing and your group's coming together?
Mhm.
How do you manage the conflict to move beyond storming? There's steps. What do you
Mhm.
do when you're norming and there's still a little bit of tension on your team? And how can you push from norming to high performing? So
Mhm.
when people learn the practical nuts and bolts of leadership and the step by steps, then they feel more confident. They're like, oh, I didn't know that there were steps to building a high performing team. And when you know better, you do better.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
then the confidence increases.
I could even see just talking about the forming and performing, storming, norming stuff for them to realize that, oh, you mean storming is a part of the process? It's not a bug; it's a feature. That would be encouraging. Are you using? You mentioned the disc profile, Clifton Strengths,
Mhm.
Kobe system. There are a number out there.
Yeah.
Um, this is a curiosity question. Do you find people who have already taken those assessments and they don't know what to do with them?
For sure, for sure. So when I work with leaders, I run an 8 module program called Mastering Leadership. There's a reason it's 8 modules because I meet with my clients, with the leaders once a month for 8 months. So we do the disc, Dawn, in the very first session. So they understand their style, their strengths, their weaknesses. But guess what I do throughout the next 7 modules? We go back to the disc.
Mm.
We review it. We talk about, okay, how are you going to integrate your style into coaching? When we talk about conflict, I'll have a conversation with leaders around, okay, let's go back to the disc. Think about conflict and different conflict management styles. What's your conflict management style? Oh, guess what? 75% of the population is different than you are, right?
Mhm.
So the way that you manage conflict is going to be very different from other people. Again, know yourself as a leader and know how to change or adjust your style to meet the needs of others. Change management is the same. Some people love change, some
Mhm.
people hate change. Some people, when they get a change initiative, they fly. Some people resist, right? So again, we go back to the disc. So
Mm.
yeah, these are tools that you really have to teach people how to integrate into their day to day.
So integrating like that, how much of it is helping somebody know himself or herself
Mhm.
and to build on their strength, and how much of it is you need to change the way you do things?
Right. Great question. So I don't talk about change. I talk about dialing stuff up and down.
Mhm.
Because I think when you start, it's such a great question. I think when you start saying to people, you need to change yourself. They're like, but then how can I be authentic?
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
way I reframe it is I want you to be the best version of yourself. So what do you need to dial up or dial down to be more successful? So let's say you're someone who's really analytical, right? Every strength, when you overuse it, actually becomes a weakness, only if you
Mhm.
overuse it. So if
Yeah.
you're someone who's analytical, like Don, what do you love about people who are analytical? How do you see that as a strength?
Mhm. And in a way, I have trouble answering that because
Mhm.
I'm one of those big picture persons. I know that about myself. So I appreciate somebody who is analytical because they can not only take care of the stuff I don't do well, they can take care of the stuff that I don't want to do well. Which was kind of, in a way, was getting, it's kind of underneath that question initially. And I love the way you're answering this about change. I can see people go to the other extreme and say, well, if I'm going to be authentic, then I just need to be big picture regardless.
Right.
And both of those seem like an extreme position. And I hear you saying adapt.
Yes. So exactly. So you have to dial stuff up and dial stuff down. So if you're super analytical, it's amazing because you can really do some great research and look at the pros and cons of a problem and I think it's really helpful to have analytical skills when you're decision making.
Mm.
However, sometimes people need to dial down their analysis because they get into analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
And then they need to dial up their faster decision making. It's the same with those of us who are big picture thinkers. Sometimes we actually need to slow down our decision making and dial up our analysis of a problem or a situation.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I teach people to do is what do you need to dial up or dial down to be the best version of yourself?
I will get bored with that kind of thing. And so, there is, it becomes a practical question about, okay, it needs to be done, and I'm the only one to do it. So even though it bores me, I just have to suck it up and do it. I suspect that I'm not doing it very well. I would probably be wiser to outsource that to somebody and find a complementary type.
Oh, 100%, right?
So do
So
you
if you
find that among leaders sometimes that they think, the only person who can do it right is me? And so it's the delegation thing you were talking about a little earlier.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think if you can delegate it, incredible, then delegate it. And people do struggle with delegation. I mean, I think the thing is also that, you know, sometimes there are things that you have to do in your job you don't like. So if that's your job, maybe you just have to dig in. And there's a great tool called Eat Your Big Frog First. I don't know if you know that
Yeah.
tool,
Yeah.
right? And so I always say to people, just eat your big frog first. If you do have that task and you legitimately can't delegate it to anyone else, eat your big frog first. Do it first thing in the morning, get it off your plate when you're fresh, and then you're going to stop worrying about it for the rest of your day. So that's what I recommend. If you can delegate it, amazing. So that's
Indeed.
one of the things that I do with delegation also is I teach people how to delegate. You can't just throw something at somebody, right? You have
Mhm.
to understand what's their developmental level. Are they brand new to the task? If so, you have to be much more prescriptive, detailed, give them the step by step, follow up, right? When they're starting to learn, you pull back a little bit until finally you can give them a lot of autonomy when they're really so like you think of development as a spectrum from developing to fully developed,
Mm.
right? If they're at that beginning stage and they're brand new, you have to give them be more prescriptive and give them detail, right? So I find leaders also in delegation are on one end of the stick or the other of that continuum, right? Some of them naturally are very detailed again in how they delegate, but when somebody becomes more developed, they have to learn to let go, or they're going to be seen as, someone who's breathing down my neck and a control freak. But
Yeah.
I do get the opposite, Don, where sometimes people are just very like I was as a leader in my early career, right? I would just say, off you go do it. And someone's like, what? I've never done this before. I don't know how to do this. I need a lot more detail from you, right? So that's another place where leaders have to change or adjust their style based on where the other person's at.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
they are new on the development scale, give them a lot more detail. As they move along that continuum and become more developed, then you can start letting go a little bit.
Mm. Mm. I can't help but wonder at this point, going back to your early experience in the classroom, and it sounds like you were teaching maybe junior high, middle grade folks.
Probably
Folks who
15-year-olds.
Okay, and I mean that's just a tough time, no matter what. I never taught in that level. I've always taught college, but I see people who are still in that kind of mindset. They've been made to go to school. They don't want to be there. If I looking back over it, some of your management skills, I will bet, have their roots right there in that environment. I'm being a little fuzzy at this point. Let me see if I can focus it more. Um, People who didn't want to learn, and I would find that very frustrating. I have great admiration for people who teach that age group. Um, with what you wound up doing, you're dealing with genuine education. Education, the word educate comes from the word educe, which means to draw forth from, and you are drawing forth people's abilities. So much of what happens in a school setting is not actually education, it's crowd control.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm assuming,
Mhm.
maybe this is an assumption. Did you find yourself in situations where upper management called in the consultant and these people have to work with you and they're almost like those 15-year-olds. I don't want to be here, but the boss is making me talk to you.
100% all the time, Don. I had that recently with a client, and you know what I did? I said to him, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you to work with Vanessa? 1 is I'd rather do anything else with my time, and 10 is I'm over the moon. Give me your number. And Don, I have to be really frank with people about it and just I just acknowledge it off the top. So I worked with a client recently. He's like, I'm at a 5. I said, great. What's the reason you're at a 5? Blah, 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 blah. He told me a story. I said, what's the reason you're not at a 2? Right? And then at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the conversation, this is sort of like a 30-minute check-in, meet your executive coach, right? I said to him, okay, what's your number at now? He said, 5.5. Wow, I was excited. We moved up 0.5.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Okay. Tell me a success story without identifying people. You know, we respect privacy. A success story of somebody who came in at a 4 or a 5, and you have a sense that towards the end they were saying, I don't know, 8 or 9, and it was genuine. They weren't just saying that to suck up to the consultant.
Totally. You know, I think about a client years ago who the CEO called me and said to me, Vanessa, you have to coach this person. They report to me. We were at an airport. We were in the Miami airport, and this person screamed at me in public. He has no emotional intelligence. He's got anger management issues, and I'm this close to firing him. I said, okay, I'm going to do my best. So, Dawn, this person came to my practice with zero emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is understanding how my emotions impact me and the people around me. So, zero emotional intelligence, zero. He was one of those unconscious leaders that I talked about before. So, we started working together, and I said to him, for example, he lacked empathy. I said to him, tell me about a time where you demonstrated empathy. And you know what he said to me? Vanessa, honestly, I can't remember a time where I ever demonstrated empathy. So I
Not
had
sure
to
what
teach,
empathy is, maybe.
right. So that's where we started. And we worked together for 2 years. And guess what happened? 5 years later, he became the CEO of that organization.
Wow.
So people can learn. The one thing I have to say about him, he did have a growth mindset. He just
Oh, good.
He didn't know how. And that's what I find with a lot of people. They want to change, they just don't know how.
Mm-hmm. Or if they don't, and I'm sure people listening to this program, they know the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. But just in case, you know, fixed mindset people think that they can't change, and growth mindset people think that you can grow and change. So you just mentioned people who want to grow but don't know how. That's a whole different problem than people who don't even think change is possible. So you run up against those and you're able to help them. I mean, why would you even bring in a consultant? I'm sure they're not coming to you of their own volition because they think it's useless.
Guess what I teach first module of my program, Dawn? Fixed and growth mindset.
Okay,
I
first one.
love Carol Dweck's book. If those of you listening have not read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, it's a game changer.
Mm.
Not only because you learn the difference between fixed and growth mindset. For me, I'm a recovered perfectionist, and I used to be really, really hard on myself. If even something small, like if I had an error in a slide, and John, when you do training, there's always somebody who's going to say, "Oh, Vanessa, you've got an error in your slide." There's always that person who's going to point it out. So in the past, I would be mortified. Something as small as that, right? I would beat myself up. I'd be completely mortified because I was in a fixed mindset. I'm thinking my clients aren't going to like me, and I'm never going to get another client again. I just dramatize, and now when I read that book, I'm like, okay, I was in a fixed mindset, moved to a growth mindset. What can I learn from this, and what will I do differently next time? I open up the slide, I fix it right then and there. I say, thank you so much. Doesn't this look better? I love teamwork, and I move on. So that book really is a game changer.
Excellent. Well, let me make sure for folks who are on here visually, we're going to show your website. And then folks who are on here audio only, we will have the links to these in the show notes. So be sure that you bookmark confidencecultivators.com so that you can get to those show notes. But here we have, for those who can see it, and actually, I think I'm on your about page. So let me go to the root here. Mosaic People Development. So that is mosaicpd.com. We'll say it out loud for folks who are on audio only. And then I'll put the QR code up here in just a second. Well, let's go ahead and do that here. So, again, folks that are on with us visually and live. Oh, and I'm noticing somebody has commented something here. We'll show that in just a moment. Where did we go? There's our QR code for the website.
Terrific.
Okay. And I'm betting this is probably somebody who knows you, Vanessa, because they're saying another great talk. It just says LinkedIn user, so I can't see who it is, but I'm sure this is a Vanessa fan. So glad that you could come on with us here today. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And then since I've got these QR codes up, it's going to look the same, folks. But I always like to encourage people to connect on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is
Mhm.
the least toxic social network out there. And so this is a great way to connect. So there's a QR code for Vanessa on LinkedIn. Um, and seeing that, oh, I know one other thing I wanted to show. You have a book out that sounds like, I'm betting this is based on the program that you were talking about, the 8 modules, Mastering Leadership. And
You're
so
absolutely right. Yes. And the book is great because it's also got self assessments. So I talk about the 3 pillars of leadership success: know yourself, manage your team, and lead your business. And then in each of those, under each of those pillars, I've got a self assessment so people can see, how am I doing in terms of knowing myself and my self awareness? How am I doing in terms of managing my team? And what are my gaps in terms of leading my business? And then, so you can do a little mini self assessment. And then there's some great strategies after that to help you close some of your gaps.
very good, very good. So, folks, you can easily check out that book, which we've got on the screen for those who are on video, um, to just kind of see how Vanessa approaches things. And then to work with Vanessa, we'll put that QR code back up again. And we've also got the crawl going across there, mosaicpd.com. Um, I had a speech student once who spent her whole speech talking about the ground zero mosaic. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And I eventually figured out she was talking about the Ground Zero Mosque in New York City.
Oh,
So let's be clear, Mosaic, Mosaic, like the art form, and people development. So that'll help you remember the PD part, mosaicpd.com. Okay, has nothing to do with the mosque. Um, Completely off the wall, almost off the wall. It actually had roots in an earlier conversation. Do you have a sense, because you've worked all over the world at this point? Do you have a sense of what was different about the Canadian education system for 15-year-olds? I don't think too highly of the American system, and in terms of being effective for education. I'm assuming Canada has compulsory education like we do here in the States. Um, do you have a sense of what's different in terms of developing leadership, personal skills, life skills, if we can even say that at a high school level? Because I'm seeing in college, we have to make up a lot of what, in my mind, should have been taken care of earlier. And I don't blame the teachers. They're working in a practically
yeah,
impossible system. So this is
agreed.
a big question, but it ties in with what you wind up doing with people, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's the same in Canada, Don. I do not think that students in high school are prepared for the real world, for college, for university. Um, One of my sons plays competitive sports. He's a basketball player. And I think when you play competitive sports, you learn a lot. You learn how to lose, you learn discipline. So for my kids, I think they've learned those skills in other parts of their life. And fortunately or unfortunately for them, they have me as a mom. So, oh, they know all about fixed and growth mindset. And I make them listen to me on podcasts. They're like, oh, do I have to listen to you on a podcast, mom? That's so boring. I'm like, yes, you do, because this is what you're going to learn before you get to college. And funnily enough, my older son is just starting first year college in
Mm.
September. So,
I,
yeah,
I
so
gotta
he's,
ask this: are they at the point yet where they say, "Okay, mom, now I see the point"? My middle daughter, about every other conversation with her, she's 35. About every other conversation with her starts out with, "Don't say I told you so."
No, they're not at that point yet.
Not at that point yet.
No.
Okay. All right.
No,
So
no, I'm still super cringy and I get a lot of eye rolls, to be
so
honest.
so kids, if you're listening to this podcast, it's coming.
Thanks, Dawn. I appreciate your support.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, we are running joke on this show, by the way, Vanessa, is we're a half-hour program that typically runs about 45 minutes. Uh, I just enjoy the conversation so much. So I like to wind up by saying there's probably something that you wish that I had asked that I did not.
Hmm.
If so, what would that be, and what would your answer to that be?
Well, I would say, if I could leave people with one word to think about as a leader, I would say perseverance. Perseverance. I know that's probably not what you expected. I mean, you hear a lot about things like empathy and sympathy and connection and development, but I really do think that to build your leadership skills and your leadership capabilities, it's not going to happen overnight. Leadership is very complex and it takes years to develop as a leader. So I would just say to people, don't give up. If you're not feeling confident, leadership is very multifaceted. Keep learning, keep growing, and persevere. Don't give up if you have one mistake. Again, that's the growth mindset perspective. Persevere.
Hmm. Very good advice, I think. Somewhere I have still in a frame a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, is one of the early 20th century presidents, on the value of perseverance.
Mm.
And I received that one summer when I was in college, selling door to door for the Southwestern Publishing Company, which that's a big part of their values, is teaching, just sticking to it. So I find it interesting is the wrong word, validated that you would say that, given what you do for a living. So thank you so much. Well, it has been great having you on here. I think it's a great model and inspiration for our listeners. And I apologize, I'm bumbling around a little bit. We have a severely disabled daughter in our home, and I was up all night with her. So I'm not functioning at complete 100%. Perhaps this illustrates the very thing you were just talking about, perseverance.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. You know what is it? Woody Allen, who said 80% of success is showing up.
I couldn't agree more. Persevere.
Very good. Well, thank you for showing up here today with us here on the Alignment Show. And if you'll hang out in the green room for just a moment so that I can thank you properly, we'll tell folks about what's coming up next week. So thanks for being here with us, Vanessa.
Thanks, Don. It was such a pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, folks, I hope that you will hold on to this episode and go back through some of the stuff that Vanessa was talking about. Check out her book. We'll have those links in the show notes, confidencecultivators.com. You'll be able to find those. And I really, you ought to check out her website. There's a lot of good stuff there on the website, a lot of opportunity to work with her. We hear from people sometimes on the show as writers. Writers will come on. And sometimes people say, well, why should I work with somebody if I can just buy the book? You want to have that connection with people. I mean, one of our frequent sayings here on the Alignment Show, the underlying work of the Confidence Cultivator, is connection before content. It's not that the content doesn't matter. It's that without the connection, the content won't matter. And I think you've got a good sense that Vanessa is a good connection and a good connector. In any case, next week we will have a solo show. I'm not 100% sure what I'll have in that next week, but it will be all about Don King next week. We'll see whether that boosts or lowers listenership. We'll find out. In any case, we appreciate you being here with us on the Alignment Show. I hope that you do find that it helps you to live your values so you can value your life. We'll see you next week. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week